So glad to have everybody back on. This is the third episode of season 2 of Lawrence Harvey's Cyber Sit Down podcast. Every month, I, alongside my colleagues, we speak with senior security leaders within the industry, discuss market trends, different things going on that we should be aware of. And today, we are privileged to have Larry Lidz, the CISO of Cisco CX Cloud, and we are going to be discussing quite a few different topics. We're going to be speaking about DevSecOps, cloud security, Larry's path of progression within his security career. And then, as always, we're going to take a bird's eye view on the industry and speak a little bit more about that. But before we do that, I should pass it over to Larry. If you could kindly introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Larry Lidz. I'm the CISO of Cisco CX Cloud. The role that I'm in, what I do is try to make sure that we're protecting the front door at Cisco that we have for our customers to interact with Cisco. And really, as we move down the path of trying to make our customers' lives easier, to make sure they can get more value and out of the Cisco investments that they've made, and meet the Cisco customers where they want in terms of the way they purchase things. So as a service versus, kind of old school buying hardware and so forth. Been at Cisco for about 4 years now, 3.5 years, I guess, is where I'm at. And the part of Cisco I'm in, we are building a cloud environment on cloud technologies, AWS, GCP, and the like. Excited to be here and excited to have the conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to dive into quite a bit. You already kind of touched on the nature of your role and how it's quite focused on making sure that things are as secure as possible within these customers' environments. Obviously, prior to Cisco, you were in a vastly different role, different security environment. I guess before we even jump into the nature of like what we were set out to talk about, over these last 3.5 years, I'm always curious to understand the differences, right? What have been some of the things that you've experienced in Cisco that have been more exciting and maybe a different challenge than what you've seen in previous environments in your security career?
Yeah, I started, and maybe a little bit of background in terms of my security career. I've been doing security now for about 25 years. Started my career at the University of Chicago. I built the security program up there pretty much from the ground up. After having done that for a while, I decided to go do something completely different, and I started doing security at CNA Insurance, so a large commercial property and casualty insurance company, and was there for 15 years. The last 7 or so as the global CISO. And then came over to Cisco. So very different industries, very different perspectives on things, and very much intentional on my part to try. I love new and different things, and different industries are fascinating.
Yep.
There's a lot of things that I find different and interesting about Cisco. First of all, Cisco is built into the way the world works these days. The internet doesn't run without Cisco's equipment. We have a large variety of different types of technologies that people use, whether it's routers and switches, or WebEx, or full stack observability technologies. And the company is undergoing a pretty significant movement towards to be more and more of a software company, to sell more things in an as-a-service model. Also, the company has really been through a ton of acquisitions over the last, however many years, decades. And that leads to a very different security approach and a different security model. Also, comparing it to the financial services industry, I would say the financial services industry, the focus is always on the bottom line. What is the way the large financial services companies tend not to make a ton of money by getting new clients and new customers, because to do that, you need to bite into the competition. And there's always a bit of give and take on that. But there's a big focus on running things efficiently and making sure that things run efficiently and effectively from that perspective. In a tech company, a lot of the growth that we see is by creating new products and new features, and really a focus on expanding the top line rather than that bottom line perspective. So we're willing to take gambles in investing in areas and doing things that enable a moving rapidly, even if that it may be inefficient in the way the organization runs. So Cisco has a number of different security teams. Mine is one of them, and that's not the sort of thing you would see in a financial services company, where there's going to be one, and everyone's going to do things in consistent ways. It also means the technologies we use and the approach that we use may vary from one part of Cisco to another. And that, as a security person, is always a challenge, because the more distinct the technologies are, the harder it is to protect, because you then start seeing differences. And even within individual teams, the area that my team supports, we may use multiple different technologies to do different things for different products.
Yep.
And that's intentional. It allows us to move quickly, but it makes it harder to protect. So it's just been a fascinating journey. Other thing I'll say, Cisco has really, really, really smart people. You think about what the internet is today, and a lot of the people who came up with the protocols and the methodologies and the way that networking work at Cisco, still work at Cisco. There's an amazing number of people who have been at
Yeah.
Cisco for 20 plus years. It's phenomenal to see. So it's a very different culture and perspective from that place.
Yeah.
And been a fascinating journey.
Yeah, 100%. Certainly sounds to be, and from what I've heard on the outside, I think seems pretty well summed up. And you make a really good point, right? These different security teams and different like business units within security almost, but I it poses an interesting opportunity for various security practitioners, because you can cross train with different people from other teams and learn ways of working and different approaches to it. So it's challenging, but it's the good type of challenge. I mean, that's how I would see it, at least.
Yeah, we absolutely, and we strongly encourage people to look for other opportunities to move around within the company, and do different things. When I joined, 3.5 years ago, the security team that I had about 4 or 5 people in it. We're now about 100, give or take a
Wow.
few on that. So we've been growing dramatically, and a lot of that is people who were at other parts of Cisco who wanted a different challenge, who wanted to do a different thing. Maybe they had spent a lot of time figuring out how to secure network switches, or how to secure WebEx or something like that. And like, I want to do something different. Like, okay,
Yep.
this is a new and interesting area. Let me learn. Let me figure that out. And that internal movement is really, really valuable. That people get to see the different perspectives and different backgrounds. And I
Yep.
think it's, what is it they say? It's a one company, many careers. And we really live that, and care a great
Yeah.
deal about supporting that.
Yeah, it's well put. It certainly is going to help people. It keeps you on your toes, to say the least. And yeah, it's again just about that continuous learning. And obviously, in the way that you've scaled your team so much over time, that's a testament to the fact that you guys are doing it right. So hats off to you on that. But cool. I appreciate the context, the background, and kind of how you came up with insecurity and where you are today in Cisco. As I had mentioned when we started the episode, some of the main topics I really wanted to dig into were going to be cloud security, naturally just tying into into your role, and as well as DevSecOps.
Yep.
At this point within the industry, DevSecOps is such a buzzword. You go on LinkedIn, there are 20 different people talking about it, but it's always in a different context. It means different things to different people. So my first question for you, Larry, would be, to you, what does it mean in practicality?
Yeah, you're spot on. DevSecOps does mean different things, different people, and maybe I'll take a step back. If we think about the concept behind DevOps, the idea, and I'm intentionally leaving out Sec. I'll bring the Sec in a second.
Yep.
But the idea behind DevOps is that you want to reduce the distance and distinction between the people writing the code and the people running the environment that it
Yep.
runs in. And you want to be able to enable stuff to get from a developer's desktop into production where customers are able to use it as quickly and easily as possible. DevSecOps is understanding that inherently part of the responsibilities of somebody who is owning an environment and writing code is to do so securely. If they don't do it securely, then there are going to be weaknesses that make the product untenable. At Cisco, we care a great deal about very, very high quality software, making sure we've got the right security in place. We set a very high bar for it, and that wouldn't be possible without having the engineers who are writing code on a day in, day out basis thinking about security as part of what they do.
Yep.
Um, it also, DevOps allows the engineer to have, who's writing the code, to have that flexibility, and to be able to make decisions that around how it runs and operates in the environment. So it may be situations where they realize that they need to get code into production to fix an issue really quickly, and maybe they're going to skirt past some testing. I'm making something up, and the system might crash because of
Yep.
that, but they're making an informed decision. And of course, they have the ramifications that they need to fix it if it goes down. DevSecOps continues that trend. The developer who's writing the code is responsible for the security of it. Now, in practical terms, we as a security team, what we want to do is make sure that we've got the right guide rails, so they can't do something that's going to put the entire system, the entire company at risk. So the goal for us is to figure out, how do we get the right guide rails in place to enable them to have the level of ownership that they have, to enable them to be able to get that functionality into production and out to our customers as quickly as possible without driving off the side of the cliff. So that's very much kind of the mindset that we take on it. And there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of different ways we look at that. And we refine that over time with conversations with the developers as to
Of
what
course.
works for them, what doesn't. So it's very much a clear partnership
Yep.
around how we go about doing that. So it's building that bridges and having those conversations that's really critical.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that, by the way. That makes a ton of sense to me, and as you said, it's just kind of bridging that gap. And from what I see, at least from like a resume perspective, and from speaking with different people that hold titles that say DevSecOps engineer or architect or consultant or whatever it might be, right? There's different paths into it. Sometimes I'll speak to people that start within the development route, and they start their career as DevOps engineers and then kind of learn the security piece. I'll sometimes speak to security engineers that then learn the DevOps piece, and it certainly goes both ways. Within your function, are there people from both types of backgrounds? Are there more people that start as a dev and then come into security, start in security and come into the dev world? Like how does that kind of line up?
Yeah, all of the above and others as well. We
Nice.
definitely have people whose background was writing code and they're passionate about it. We have people who come from like a cloud infrastructure, build out AWS accounts, make sure those are protected or make sure
Yep.
those are set up correctly, who do that. One of the tenets of kind of a DevSecOps methodology and continuous integration, continuous deployment, CID/CD, that you may hear about, is
Yep.
you start thinking about things like the infrastructure of the environment being code itself. So the work that somebody does to secure things is often writing code. They might be writing something in Terraform as one of the main technologies we use for doing that, and that's different than maybe 5 or 10 years ago, where a lot of the work would be, I don't know, they log into a firewall console and click some buttons and
Yep.
create a firewall rule. Now they're doing that as code, or in some cases, the developer is writing that firewall rule as a code, and a security person's looking at it to make sure that it's safe as kind of the review before it gets pushed into production. So again, depending on the specific organizations, those roles and responsibilities can vary, and sometimes it can be both. That allows the speed while making sure you've got the right protection in place. I don't want to make it seem like the only skills that we need in the team are those like technical developer skills and
Of
so
course.
forth. That's clearly part of it. But, we have folks who are doing awareness and compliance and market access and a whole bunch of other things that are not the kind of hands-on keyboard coding type skill sets. One of the great things about security is it takes people from any background, any perspective, and
Yep.
people can be highly effective at it. And that definitely holds in our environment. It's just different than it was, 5, 10 years ago when you were thinking about old school data centers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's going to continue to evolve, obviously. I mean, I'm seeing, again, just tying into how often I'm on LinkedIn, and just kind of seeing different people's opinions throughout the security community. We're seeing all these different trends that are talked about. What are some of the trends that you envision throughout 2024 and beyond that are going to be a lot more relevant this year than in previous years? And then how is that going to tie back into your function?
Yeah, I think if you go back a few years, there were a lot of security people who were afraid of the cloud.
Yep.
And they're like, oh my God, we can't put anything in the cloud. We can't trust it. And then over time, people started realizing actually, like, there's some real advantages to the cloud. Like, first of all, nobody's got the same budget that the big cloud providers do to protect their data centers and so forth. So there's some
Correct.
things that they're just going to do better than any company can do. But also there's methodologies and approaches. If we find an issue in our code, we can get that deployed into production, in minutes if we need to, versus when it was back in the data center and you had dev and ops being completely different, it could
Yep.
be hours to days to do that. So that trend towards DevSecOps and towards the cloud, I think, is going to continue, and it's going to continue at speed. I believe you'll start seeing some of those same mindsets and thought processes beginning to move back into companies' data centers.
Okay.
And if you start thinking about, like, how do you manage firewalls in a data center? Can you use the same DevSecOps methodology that you might use in the cloud to apply it to stuff that's in the data center? We'll see as that goes, but as a security professionals, you want your environment to be simple and easy to manage. And if
Yep.
you can do infrastructure as a code and you can deploy that, and then you just have the deployment go to either an AWS firewall or a Cisco firewall in a data center, like that type of thing is going to be makes life a lot simpler. So I think you'll see some of that. I think that we're also going to be at a big turning point in the next year around artificial intelligence and large
Of
language models and
course.
the uses of those. Um, I think you'll start seeing more AI features and functionalities get into different products, which security professionals will start using. And I think you'll start seeing security professionals beginning to leverage AI in different ways than
Yep.
they have in the past. Um, I also think the conversations around ethical use of AI and making sure that AI is being used effectively is going to end up being something that security teams, aligned with AI folks, aligned with privacy folks, aligned with lawyers, begin to have more and more conversations about what that really means. My
Yeah.
guess is within 2024, you'll start seeing the first sets of real world attacks against AI models
Wow.
that are being used for nefarious purposes. But we'll see.
Yeah, 100%. And with that, obviously, there might be new regulations that come into place, different, ways of working to try to combat some of the negative effects that can come of it. And yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like this is the third episode of this podcast that I've recorded so far this season, and every time when I ask a leader about different trends in the industry, like AI is going to continue to come up. And for good reason. Like it's such a powerful technology, and obviously you want to make sure that it's in the hands of the right people and it's being leveraged the right way, right?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that, I mean, putting aside we in the security industry have been using AI for ages, right? That's what
Of course,
anti-spam
of course.
is for all intents and purposes. And I'm sure threat actors are using AI as well to be able to find ways to get past things. I think one of the big challenges that we have as a society is that if you look at chat GPT, and if you look at generative AI models, a lot of them are what I would say low to medium fidelity information. They can give you good information that may or may not be accurate. And it's
Correct.
dependent on a person to vet that accuracy of it. And how that happens and what that means for society and what that means for the different use cases is still to be determined. Like if you're using AI to look at logs to see if there's an attack going on that's meaningful, the AI only needs to be able to catch things that a human might not be able to catch, which is not the highest bar to get across, because people are fallible and there's a lot of logs to look at, and
Yep.
technology tends to be really good at looking at a lot of data and coming to analysis quickly. But if you're looking at it for things like a bank trying to figure out what credit card rate to give,
Yeah.
if the human would give rate X, and the AI comes back and says it's
I
a rate
gotcha.
lower than X, like the company now is losing real money because they've got the wrong rate behind it. So like there's things like that that we
Yeah.
haven't figured out as a society yet how to use, but that'll happen naturally.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, I hear you loud and clear. For like, I guess the right way to put it would be for doing various tasks, and I don't want to just say automating processes, but for making processes efficient, like, yeah, absolutely, we should be leveraging AI, but at the same time, we don't want to just use it point blank for knowledge because, yeah, there could be some information that's not 100% there, and it takes that human intelligence to, at the same time, verify what's true and what's not. Yeah, that's totally reasonable and makes a ton of sense to me. But cool. That covers obviously what I wanted to accomplish in speaking about different trends in the industry.
Mm.
I do want to kind of pull it back into what we
Yep.
were speaking about on the DevSecOps topic because again, it's interesting to me and it's something that so many people in my network and the audience of this podcast are going to be interested to hear about. Obviously, in any large tech organization, you will have people that are hands on the keyboard technical, and we kind of already alluded to it. We'll have people that aren't technical. Even you'll have like obviously Cisco is such a massive organization. There are going to be people outside of the security function that know nothing about security. So, my question for you, Larry, is like, how do you create that security culture, but not just within the security team, but take that and broaden it out so people that aren't hands-on security practitioners or developers are able to buy into the concept of security?
Yeah, the good thing is over the last, I don't know, however many years, people understand the importance of security in a way they didn't before. You see companies which have significant negative financial impacts because they haven't managed security well.
Yep.
My experience is executives really understand security, and that's true whether or not it's at Cisco or previous places as well. Like they get the importance behind it. That makes our lives as security professionals easier.
Yep.
Um, what I find has been most effective in my career when it comes to getting buy-in to that security culture, first of all, is to help people understand the important things is the outcomes that we get to. It's not about
Okay.
checking the check boxes on a list and saying, I did everything the security team asked me for. You as an individual are accountable for making sure that what you're doing and how you're doing things is secure. And if something goes wrong from that perspective, it's your problem. If you're a developer and you write insecure code, even if a security person looked at it, it's still your code. You still owned it. And that's kind
Yeah,
of
of
the DevSecOps methodology and approach. That's
course.
also true for how people interact with and use technology. If they're logging in and someone gets their password and uses an attack to get past multi-factor authentication, like, well, you shouldn't have clicked on that link that you clicked on or whatever. Like that's the accountability.
Yep.
In terms of the conversations and so forth and how to drive that culture, one, it's really important not to talk down to the folks who you're dealing with, and to make sure that there's a shared understanding of the objective on that. I'm also a big fan of frequent short connections and interactions. So when we're talking about security, and we're trying to get folks in the broader organization to be thinking about it and prioritizing it. What we try to do is within my area of focus, my function is make sure that we are talking about it in bite-sized approaches. That might be a quick
Okay.
email. We use WebEx Teams, is not surprisingly. So it may be in a larger all organization room saying like, hey, everyone should be careful not to do A, B, and C, whatever that is, or should do, these other things like, hey, you use a password manager. There's really good password managers. And here's the one that we recommend people go and make available for people to use, whatever the specific topic is. But those short, quick tips, I think,
Yep.
really resonate with people in a way that if you try to do an hour or 2 hour long training session, you lose the audience and they
Yeah.
don't pay attention to it. And
Yeah.
meeting the audience where they are is also critical.
Okay.
I've been through in my career so many trainings on starting, way back in the day. I'll use HIPAA as the example. Trainings on how to protect health information. Back when I was working in higher ed, that was the HIPAA came out, and we had a large hospital associated with the university, and went through all this HIPAA training. And the HIPAA training would spend ages talking about like, here's what the specific gets covered under, the different sections of the HIPAA regulations.
Of
But it
course.
doesn't actually tell people what they need to know, which is
Yep.
much simpler. We don't need to train them about the law. We need to train them that they shouldn't be sharing information in insecure ways and give them very specific concrete steps as to what they should be doing. So that's what I mean when I say meet them to where they are, make it tangible, make
Of
it
course.
bite-sized, And that sets a really good culture.
Yeah, I like that a lot, honestly. And even if I just think about like my own organization and how we go about promoting security and what we do, it's always about bringing it back to, the business implications of what you're doing. And I really like the point on that bite-sized piece. Make it understandable. Don't make it a long lecture. Make it, organized information that somebody's able to comprehend, somebody that's not technical and hands-on within security. And if you can understand the real world effects, you're going to get more buy-in. I hear you loud and clear. I think that over the last few years, even in the 5 years that I've been in cybersecurity recruiting, I I think people are more aware now. People understand the importance of it, and hopefully that trend is going to continue to shift upwards more and more. So we're heading in the right direction, but um, certainly we're not fully there yet. So we want to continue to improve and do all we can, right?
Yeah, I think the difference for security from other professions and other areas is that although we're getting better, the threat actors are also getting better. So the
Yes,
more aware we make people, the more that we teach them about what the threat actors are doing, the threat actors need to change their tactics to be successful. They change their tactics. So this is not something where suddenly we're going to declare success and cross it off the list. We don't need awareness programs anymore.
of
This is
course.
going to be a constant approach. And by the way, I find that people really love hearing about what threat actors are doing in practical terms around attacks.
Yeah.
And it really helps them understand, not just what to do at work, but also at home and how to protect their family as well.
Yeah, which is super important. It's a topic that I've briefly dove into on this podcast already, but just like personal hygiene within personal security hygiene, that is so important. And yeah, like again, it's going to with different threat actors evolving, it's just going to keep trending. So I hear you loud and clear, and I really appreciate the context there. We've covered some good technical topics thus far, Larry. I have a slate of general questions that I like to ask on this podcast as well that won't
Wonderful.
necessarily tie into like the whole DevSecOps, CloudSec world. It might a little bit, um, but yeah, a few questions that I wanted to ask you. I'll start with one. Obviously, as a senior security leader, I would imagine there are different people at different levels coming into your security organization. And we will have some people, the audience of this podcast, that are going to be junior, just trying to get their first job within security. What's your advice for people trying to come up within the security industry? How can they stand out? What do you look for in candidates that are really looking to make their mark?
Yeah, I think, to your point, it depends a little bit on what part of their career is and how they go through things. I'd say starting out, like when you're first trying to get into security, I would suggest having an open mind. Security is a very wide field, and there's a lot of different types of skills and different ways you can use things. And the number of times where I've talked to somebody who has been thinking about their career and they say, I really want to be a pen tester. I want to act like the attackers and do red team attacks and get into the environment. And as they actually experience security and try different things, they start realizing I didn't even know that there's a role in security doing A, B, and C.
Yeah,
I really want to do this instead. So keeping that open mind and trying to move around the different aspects of security is, I think, a really, really, really important thing, frankly, for anyone anywhere in their career, but certainly at the beginning stages of the career.
for sure.
Even in the middle careers, like we have folks who have been long-term um, security experts, managers, leading teams, and we try to shuffle it up a little bit, like swap responsibilities around. Different perspectives, different backgrounds, different eyes on problems really helps us. And that also drives to a desperate need in our industry for increasing diversity so that
Yes,
we have the same level of diversity of thought within our teams that the threat actors do when they try to attack us. So I think that's step number one on that. Security is also one of those fields where so much of what we do requires building strong, solid relationships and communicating effectively about very complex issues.
yep,
Whether those are technical or non-technical issues, they're complex. So learning how to do that, spending time building your soft skills, spending time, learning how to communicate to people, understanding how to listen so you understand where the people you're communicating with come from. Those are all really, really important skills that you should be thinking about how you develop in parallel to the security domain expertise that you're building at the same time.
100%. Those soft skills are equally as important to a certain degree. Like, if you're not able to communicate with colleagues, peers, leaders, in some cases, depending on the type of organization, customers,
Yep.
like that could be a major detriment. So I totally get that. It's really valuable insight there. And just to go back to your first point, I really like that in terms of like keeping that open mind. I hear you loud and clear. I think that a lot of the time people looking to come into the industry, they see the shiny lights of the pen testing world, emulating the attacker or whatever it could be, and that's kind of where a lot of people gravitate towards. But there's so many other disciplines within security, starting within a traditional security operations environment, starting within the GRC route, whatever it can be. Finding the path, seeing what you like, and then getting exposure throughout your career. Yeah, I think that's really important for people to understand. And yeah, it's going to help create diverse security teams with diversity of thought, as you said. So I appreciate that insight. And I was going to ask about some of the soft skills that we look for in people, but you already kind of touched on that. Um, so anything else on the soft skill piece? I mean, we did kind of just cover that in the last
Yeah,
in that
I
previous
might
question.
add the other thing is security is one of the things I love about security is that because it's such a broad field that people can come to it from all different backgrounds and all different perspectives.
Yes.
And you may have someone who was an accountant
Yep.
and you think about like, what's an accountant have to do with security? Well, they're really good at looking at details, making sure things will actually work the way they say they are. Um, One of the top things I always worry about is getting overconfident in the controls we have. And people who've got that background and look at it and say like, yeah, like it seems good on paper, but let's actually dive in and make sure the numbers add up. Not technically numbers in many cases, but the
Yeah.
controls work the
Yeah.
way we say they are. Like that's a really useful skill. We're
Yeah.
talking about awareness and training, like that's communication skills.
Yep.
Completely different background. Of course, we need people who have been developers or who have run infrastructure, but it's such a broader field than that. I think, even, coming from completely, from liberal arts and other things along those lines, those skills can be very valuable. So
Yeah.
spend time thinking about what underlies those skills, what those soft skills you have, and be able to help pull that together into, your application when you're looking for jobs. And it is also a really good differentiator when people can articulate that background and that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Do you have, and obviously I don't want to know specific names of anybody, but are there any cool success stories within your function or peers in the industry that kind of coming from that route into security that might not be traditional and you've seen it work really well?
I would say probably half the people that I have deal with
Nice.
come from a different than a technical background, both in my team and other security teams. Like when you actually start talking to people, what's their degree in, how they do that, what they look for. My previous company, we did a whole bunch of our new college hires because of the broader organizational need. There was a focus on business analysis and project management skills. So not security
Certainly.
skills at all. But like
Yep.
we're like, look, let's like we didn't have enough demand for new college hires, early in career hires, that we were going to spin up our own security program. So we'll tap into that.
Yep.
And we had our entire e-discovery and forensics team where people had been through this program at a certain point. And, so none of them came from the background. And like forensics is about as technical as you get. Like it is as detailed in the weeds, like
Yeah.
understand what's
Yeah.
going on. And it was a huge success story because we were thoughtful around that. We figured out how to create the training and the program to be able to support people gaining those skills. It wasn't that we were particularly targeting them to be in that part of the organization, but it's turned out that's where we had the need and that's what their interest was. And we were able to make a number of good connections on that. So not the sort of thing that you would necessarily think of and expect, as to where that came from. And, when I say they were, in the early in career stuff, some of them had gone to school training to be, teachers and educators, and not, so it wasn't just people who were like, oh, I'm going to be a IT project manager,
Of course.
who were in that. It was a really good program that led to some really smart people doing really phenomenally good work in a really complex, hard area.
Good.
So I was really impressed with that, and it just always reminds me, keep your eyes open and don't
Yeah.
prejudge things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and it makes me happy to hear. I mean, we always say it, but the overall sentiment within security is we need more and more security practitioners, obviously. So, like, if we have anybody in the audience that's listening and might feel that they're too far in their career to make a career transition and focus on something else, like, let this be your your note and your understanding that it's never too late. And certainly there's a skill set that can translate in many different lines of work. So I think that's a really powerful message for us to communicate to this audience, regardless of who's listening. Thank you a lot for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've seen people who have been well along in their careers and like, oh, security, that seems interesting. Let me learn more. And like
Yeah.
the people who I think are successful are thoughtful about, how to gain the skills that they need, how to begin to think like a threat actor, but how to begin to, contemplate like what needs to be done in those areas, and are curious and have that learning agility and desire to grow. And, they figure out how to use their backgrounds effectively to do that. So I think it's a great field for people as a second career.
Absolutely. You and I are on the same page there, Larry. Well, this is great. We have covered pretty much everything that was on the agenda. I have one more remaining question, and it's a bit of a fun one. Um, Obviously, as a security leader, you probably have millions of people reaching out to you, looking to do business with you from a sales background, a recruitment background, whatever it can be. Um, were there any pieces of outreach that have ever stood out to you? Obviously, we don't need to name names or anything, but the worst outreach, or it could be funny, or just anything that comes to mind.
Um, Salespeople who call my cell phone, that drives me absolutely batty. Actually, salespeople who call me on the phone, like, I mean, I was probably at Cisco for 9 months before I found out they've got a phone number. Like, I mean, it's just not the way people do business
Yeah.
anymore. We use technologies like WebEx, and, we email, and, things like that, text in some cases. But I did, at one point, a salesperson who we were doing a lot of business with, gave my cell phone number to a number of other salespeople, who gave it to other salespeople, and it
Uh,
propagated,
yeah,
driving me absolutely batty because on that. But I also think for sales folks, recognizing that when you get numbers from people, you should find out what type of number it is. And if it's their cell phone number, maybe you treat it differently than if it was a work phone. Um,
certainly.
I actually don't think that phone calls are a great way to get new business. As a salesperson, I think the best way is word of mouth from one CISO to another, is to think about how you can foster the relationships from that perspective.
Yeah.
The on the recruiter side, I'll say the thing that drives me the most batty is when I get things that are very clearly form letters saying, "Hey, we have this job. We think it's a great fit for you. We're looking for an entry level person to do blah 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 in the security field." And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, like if you had looked at my resume, you can probably guess that I'm not interested in an entry
of
level
course.
position. Now if you had reached out and said like, "Hey, I'm, like I want to know if there's anyone you have in your network who might be interested in this," I'm
That's
much more
different.
likely to
Yeah,
respond to that and help out. I want to make good talent connections for folks on my team who are looking for new opportunities, or who I
yeah,
know from past past things. So I'm always happy to help make those connections when it makes sense.
of
But
course.
I need to understand kind of what it is, and just randomly throwing something like that out just sets the wrong tone from the get-go.
No, I can certainly understand that. I think just to kind of summarize what you said there, it's about the relationship building piece, good word of mouth, respecting the right boundaries. And again, that ties into the broader topic of what we were speaking about with communication skills and being able to read the room and just like understand the bigger picture. And just like regarding the potential audience for this podcast, like we will have hands-on security practitioners, but we're also going to have security salespeople listening. So
Absolutely.
this isn't an invite, by the way, for a bunch of people to um, you know, do this and that. But at the same time, it's helpful for everybody to hear. So I really do appreciate that context, Larry.
Yep. Yeah. Good.
Cool. Well, this was really one of the more insightful episodes. I think we covered a lot on a technical perspective. We covered a lot regarding some of the soft skills and in the wider industry. I really do appreciate you taking the time to hop on in the middle of or in the start of the year, because I know that's when things get crazy. So Larry, I appreciate it a ton, and I'm looking forward to our further collaborations, to say the least.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope it's of use to the audience and they have good takeaways and things they've learned from it. I'd say in summary, a few things for people to think about and remember. Cloud security is awesome. DevSecOps is a good thing for you to build skills and start
Yep.
thinking about and understanding. Don't be afraid just because it seems really technical. If you're not technical and you don't want to be technical, there's great careers and methods for people to be awesome security professionals. And I could have a laundry list of people who I think have done phenomenally well in their career coming from non-technical backgrounds. So keep at it. We need as much help as we can.
Awesome. Absolutely well put. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Again, I appreciate it, and we shall certainly continue to be in touch. But I will leave you to it for now.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right.